Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Racha Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is Esther, chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. Before we get started, I just want to remind you, brothers, that Elder Pastor is filming on this or putting up his videos on this channel, Elders in Transit 3. I put the link in the description box in case you can't find it. You should be able to, no problem, when you type it in. And that's that. Now, this lesson came through the inspiration of a video I watched. I think it was last week. And I believe it was on this page, Elder Pastor did, GMS Declaring the End. I'm not sure what video it was, because he kind of mentioned it. He didn't really go into a lesson. He just kind of mentioned it and kind of went through a couple of, I can't remember exactly how it went, but like I said, I can't remember what video it was. But he was speaking about Ahasuerus. He was speaking about Xerxes and Elam, you know, the Persians, and being the so-called East Indians. So I kind of wanted to do like a little something on it. Go through a couple of precepts, show you a couple of maps, and pretty much that's it. You know, hopefully it'll be an edifying lesson. I was looking up something. I was actually just watching Elder Yashawamba's video that he did on Marathayim or Marathayim, which is another name for America. Which I remember the first time I heard of that was the brother Yashalom from the New York camp. He kind of brought it to my attention. And I looked it up. I also looked up Pekod. The word Pekod means visitation, because the Most High is going to visit this place for all its wickedness. And somehow it led me to Ahasuerus and, you know, that whole thought pattern, which I know it's a spirit. So we're just going to go through it, you know, and give a couple of pointers, and Lord's will, like I said, it'll be an edifying lesson. When we go to Esther 1 and 1, this was when we were under the captivity of the Medieval Persian Empire. Cyrus the Great being the first Persian ruler of that empire. You had two empires that ruled at that time. You had the Medes that were very prevalent and prominent, you know, empire back then. They had their own little thing, and they were great, you know, as far as the empire is concerned. But the Persians became greater, pursuant to the prophecy in Daniel, the 7th chapter, how it became pretty much one. And even Daniel, the 8th chapter, goes into it also. You know, how one, you know, they were both ruling. One came up first, but the one that came up second pretty much had a greater rule. And the Medes became subject or tributary to the Persian Empire. So that's why sometimes you'll hear it called the Medieval Persian Empire, because they ruled jointly. Just like when the Babylonian Empire was ruling, you had the Assyrians that were ruling before them, the Assyrian Empire. And then pretty much the Babylonian Empire absolved, or not absolved, it added, so for lack of better words, it added the Assyrians to them, so they became known as the Assyrio-Babylonian Empire. Just like you also have a term called the Greco-Roman Empire. All right, so that was the case in here. So what we're reading right now is about an actual Persian king named Ahasuerus. It says, "Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus," this is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 120 provinces. Now let's prove that Ahasuerus was an actual Persian king. So Ezra 4 and 7. Now this is when you read from the first verse down, this is when the heathen nations, you know, they came to hinder the work. They acted like they wanted to help us build, but when they found out that, you know, like always, that they never had a part in it with us, the only reason why they were in that land was because our forefathers sinned. They got kicked out, and there were transplants, heathenistic transplants, put into the land of Samaria and those regions there. And that's why they were in that land. Then you had one Levite priest that went there to teach them of, the ways, because the Lord has sent lions among them to tear their ass up because they were not keeping the ways of the land. Now, there's a movie called Ghost in the Darkness, which featured, I believe that was Val Kilmer that was in that movie, where it showed you these two lions that were terrorizing people back then. So that's kind of like a reminder of what that whole history goes into, of them lions coming into it. They had a spirit on them, and the Lord put the spirit on those lions to tear up them different nations that were in there. All right, so when they came, they really came for mischief, to try to hinder the work. And when they found out that they couldn't build with us, which that was never the case, the nations could never build with us, then they started to, write letters to the king at that time, which was Ahasuerus. So this was it. It says, Ezra 4:7, and in the days of Artaxerxes, which is another name for Ahasuerus, wrote Bishlam, Mithridath, Tabiel, and the rest of the companions, and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. See? And the writing of the letter was written in the Syrian tongue and interpreted in the Syrian tongue. Now, just bear with me 1 second. I had just wanted to double check something on my phone. Okay. All right, just bear with me. Arathashashatha. Wow, that's a mouthful. Artaxerxes, I will make the spoil to boil. Damn. I will stir myself in winter, son of successor of Xerxes as emperor of Persia. So this was actually the son of Xerxes, which Xerxes was, his other name was Ahasuerus. All right. So they were kings of Persia. So I just went there just to show you that they were Persian kings. All right. It says a title rather than name of several Persian kings, Artaxerxes. So this was an actual title. Artaxerxes, Ahasuerus, Xerxes. Those are all titles, just like you had titles like Darius, Ptolemy, Seleucus, Antiochus. Those are all titles. Caesar. They were all titles of these different empires, all right, the ones that ruled in those regions. So now that we got that out the way, that this Artaxerxes, which was the son of Xerxes or Ahasuerus, they were Persian kings. Let's go back to Esther 1:1. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. Now let's look up the name Ahasuerus, which is Ahashawarawash. All right. Ahasuerus, I will be silent and poor. Title of the king of Persia, probably Xerxes. No, it is Xerxes. Let's see. Right. Of Persian origin. An example, Ahasuerus of Artaxerxes. But in this case, Xerxes, the title rather than the name of the Persian king, Ahasuerus. All right, so this is Xerxes, when you watch the movie 300, that Persian king that made war against the Spartans. He was of Persian origin, and the individual that played him was actual Brazilian. That played him, that big tall dude, he was actually Brazilian. All right, so it says, and now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. This is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 120 provinces. So his kingdom was from India all the way to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, and that's the regions where he ruled. Matter of fact, before we go any further, this is a map here, not a world map, but a map of the what they call the old world. And you see here Ethiopia and this region all the way across to what? To India. This is what, like around here, maybe this much, or somewhere around here. This was the empire of, at the height of their empire, they had all this land. So by the time of Ahasuerus, which is Xerxes, this is what he was ruling from here to here. You have another image here. That's Elam, Susa. So we're going to get to that, Lord's will. And this was Empire of Cyrus, which was from this region. Well, actually, everything that's in dark green, this was actually what was ruled by Xerxes. The stuff that's in light green were the additions that were made to the empire, as you can see India down there, by the conquest of Darius the First. All right. So this is the extent of their kingdom, from so-called Ethiopia all the way to so-called India. All right, because the Elamites, which we're going to see, these Elamites are actually Persians. That was another name for the Persians, because it was Elam, then it was Persia. Now they call themselves Iranians, but they're all a part of the same, that whole so-called East Indian family. Those are the Elamites. And the word Elam, Ayalam, means young. All right. This is another picture, as you can see here. This is even a little further extent. You got all of this land that's in green. This is all of the empire of the Persians. Okay. So let's go back. So from India even unto Ethiopia, over 107 and 20 provinces. And there's a term called Hodu. Hodu, Hodu, that's another name, or like a, it's from Hebrew origin. All right. When you see the name Hodu, that's another name for India. Because when you go down here to the name India, Hadawa, right? And that's what they say, Hodu. As you can see here, it says Hodu, Hadawa. India, flee away or give thanks. The country surrounding the Indus, mentioned as the eastern border of the empire of Ahasuerus. See? So when you look up India and you look up those terms, there's I believe there's an actual word that calls them Hodu when you do the research. All right, and it only appears twice in the book of Esther, 1:1 and 8:9, and the word Indian appears once in the book of First Maccabees, the 6th chapter. All right, now going back, it says that in those days when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the palace. So when we look up the word Shushan, this is a part of his kingdom, right? Shushan, where the palace was at, you have the word Shawashan. Shushan or Susa, which is lily. It says the winter residence of the Persian kings, located on the river Ulai or Choaspes. And there was a prophet, I forget who it was. Oh, nope. Ulai, I forgot the I. Daniel, right? And I saw in the vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in the vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. And that's beautiful because I forgot about this precept. And it brings it all together. So he said he was in the province of what? Elam. Which shows you that the so-called East Indians, no matter what they call themselves, Carmenians, Iranians, they're all Elamites. It all goes back to, they could call themselves East Indians, Pakistani, they're all Elamites. All right, and that's what their nation goes back to biblically, not worldly. Then we look up the word Elam here. Where are we at? Elam, Ayalam, Ayalam, from the Hebrew word Elam, which really it means young. Right, and then you also ask, and now see, this is a good point too, because we've always talked about how you have individuals out there that try to use names to try to connect Israelites to heathens. All right, now the Elamites are heathens. They are one of the sons of Shem, because I believe that was his firstborn son, Elam. And they are Shemites, but they are heathens. They're not Israelites. But you do have 6 Israelites that were named Elam in the scriptures. So does that make them Elamites? No, they just happen to have that name. You got to remember, association of names back then. Everybody was speaking the same language. So names were common. There were a lot of common names back then that were being used by different nations. All right? Just want, as a side note. So that's Elam. So we're talking about what? The palace that was in Shushan, the palace that was in Shushan by the river Ulai, in the province of Elam. All right, tying all of this together, Shushan. So now when we go to, it says a place in Persia. Now when we go to the map, where is it? Right here, you have Assyria, you have Babylon, Babylonia, you have what's called the Persian Gulf, Elam, Susa, and you have Persia. All right, this is all a part of that. Susa, because remember it's Shushan, but also known as Susa. And this is that area, that region, and this is where, because remember everything started here. This is the restarting of civilization after the flood. After the flood, what happened? The people. Let's go to, how can we put this? Let's try Middle Eastern map. Middle East map. Let's see what we could glean off of this. Let's try this one. Let's try this one here. I don't like those complicated, bugged out maps. Like something, sometimes you have so much writing. Now, here we have Turkey, or Turkey, as they like to say, Turkey or Turkia. Then you have Syria, Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq. You have Iran, Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, right? You have here what? Armenia. Now, when we read the scriptures, Noah, when the ark landed, it said it landed on the mountains, plural, mountains of Ararat. So there's a mountainous region in Armenia, in Ararat, where that ship or that ark landed. And then from that point, once the waters receded, Noah, his 3 sons, their wives, their 4 wives, each one of them had a wife. They all came off the ark with the animals and everything. And from this point on, civilization or the earth started to be repopulated. And this is why you have all of this region here. Where is it? All of this region here from Armenia down, the land between the 2 rivers, Mesopotamia, the land of Shinar. This is where civilization started. And from this point on, those 3 sons, which had sons and they had sons and they had sons, that's where they started to increase. And then they started to, spread out. Because remember, you had the Tower of Babel. Tower of Babel, the Lord confounded the languages. And from that point on, they left off building. And what happened? They started to migrate. and come. Of course, they're going to get together with the ones that spoke their languages, or their dialect, and then from that point on, they started to spread out. All right. So going back, so that's Susa. So let's go back to that Susa right there. Persians, Elam. We show you the extent of the Persian Empire under Cyrus and under Darius. This is another, another map that actually shows you even further of, because in the green it says extent of the Persian Empire at the time of Ezra. See? And this was, I'm not sure. I have to look it up because if Esther and Ezra were around at the same time, I have to look up the dates. But this is the extent of because remember, Ezra was in the Persian Empire. You had some prophets that were actually in the Assyrian Empire, ended up in the Babylonian Empire. You had some that were in the Babylonian Empire, ended up in the Persian Empire. You had some that were in the Persian Empire that ended up in the Greek Empire, so on and so forth. All right. So this is the extent of the Persian Empire during the time of Ezra, as we just read here. Then here it says territories of the Hellenic League. As you can see here, Athens, and this is around the time when they started to really start to get a little bit of steam, but they weren't any match for the Persian Empire at the time. But eventually down the line, the Lord will put the spirit on Alexander the Creep, which we call him Alexander the Greek, or Alexander the Creep. He's Alexander. They call him Alexander the Great, the son of Philip II of Macedon. And that's when they started taking over. All right, so let's see. Return of Judean exiles under Ezra's leadership. Right, because that happened during that time. And they show you that's the arrow going back from Babylon back to Jerusalem. And this is what we read in Ezra, the 4th chapter, how when they came to Jerusalem under the orders of these kings, they were being hindered from building because the nations knew that once these people build this place up and they start sacrificing to their power and keeping their God's law, statutes, and commandments, they're going to be a problem. And that's why these devils came. Because it says, now when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the children of the captivity builded the temple unto the Lord power of Israel, then they came to Zerubbabel and to the chief of the fathers and said unto them, let us build with you, for we seek your power as you do, and we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Ashur, which brought us up hither. All right. And you know the rest of the story. And if you don't, read it. The book of Ezra is a very good book to read because it gives you a lot of history of how the rebuilding of the temple took place after the destruction of the temple by the Babylonians, and that whole situation that happened with the Babylonians or the Babylonian Empire. Now, we're dealing with the Persian kings. We're dealing with Susa or Shushan, and what you have to understand is before it was named Persia, it was named Elam. So you had Elam, you had Persia, and then eventually it was changed. When Persia became Iran, Iran was always known as Persia to foreign governments and was once heavily influenced by Great Britain and Russia. In 1935, however, the Iranian government requested that all countries with which it had diplomatic relations call the country by its Persian name, Iran. All right. But before that, it was known as Elam, biblically. And those people, they're all the same people. The so-called Iranians, the Persians, the Iranians, Persians, and the so-called East Indians, they're all part of the same peoples. And as we went through in this lesson, you had the overspreading or the repopulation of the earth taking place in this area. And that's how the nations started to build and to spread out and to take over or grab lands that were there in that area. All right. So that's pretty much it. I think we covered and hit all the points. This was just something to go into, showing you that the Persians, Elamites, so-called Iranians, they're all, Elam, so-called East Indians. We're so used to saying Elam. All right. So with that, I pray that you brothers and a few sisters have been edified. To the next time I say shalom. And don't forget, to, if you haven't subscribed to Elder Pastor's channel, Elders in Transit 3, this is where he's putting up videos now until December or so, when he's able to get back on his page, GMS Declaring the End. Shalom.